You'd be surprised how much you can learn about a person just by watching. Not talking, not asking questions, just watching. Most people think privacy is a right, but I've always seen it as a privilege, one that is easily revoked the moment you step into someone else's property. My property, to be exact. I own a small apartment in a quiet part of town. Nothing fancy, but it's clean, safe, and the rent is reasonable. I take pride in keeping it that way. Over the years, I've had all sorts of tenants, students, couples, even a retired school teacher who left the place smelling like lavender for months. But none of them interested me the way the latest one did. She was young, maybe 22 or 23, with a nervous smile and a habit of glancing over her shoulder as if she expected someone to be following her. She seemed grateful when I handed her the keys, her hands trembling just a little. I told her the usual things: no smoking, no pets, rent due on the first. She nodded, barely meeting my eyes. I could tell she was the type who'd keep to herself, who wouldn't cause trouble. The perfect tenant. Of course, she didn't know about the cameras. No one ever does. I installed them myself years ago when I realized how much easier it was to manage a property when you could see what was happening inside. They're small, discreet, tucked behind vents and inside smoke detectors. I check the feeds every night just to make sure everything's in order. It's not about trust, it's about control. The first week, she barely left the apartment. She unpacked slowly, moving her things from box to shelf with a kind of careful deliberation, as if she was afraid of making too much noise. She spent hours on her laptop, headphones on, sometimes mouthing words to herself. I watched her make tea, read in bed, pace the living room late at night. She talked to herself sometimes, little fragments of conversation that made no sense to anyone but her. I started keeping notes, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. There's a certain satisfaction in cataloging someone's life, in knowing their routines better than they do. She always made tea at 8:15, always checked the lock on the door twice before bed, always left the bathroom light on overnight. Patterns, habits, weaknesses. Sometimes I'd catch her staring at the window, as if she sensed something just out of sight. Once she stood in the hallway for nearly 10 minutes listening. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers curled into fists. She was scared, but she didn't know why. That's the beauty of it. Fear without a source, anxiety that gnaws at you until you start to question your own sanity. I never touched her things, never entered the apartment when she was home. That would be reckless. I'm not reckless. I'm patient. I wait, I watch, I learn. That's how you stay in control. But then things started to change. She began moving the furniture, just a little, an inch here, a foot there. She started checking the smoke detectors, running her fingers along the edges as if she was searching for something. She unplugged the router at night, covered her laptop camera with a sticker. She even taped over the peephole on the front door. I could feel her slipping away from me, bit by bit. The more she tried to protect herself, the more fascinated I became. It was like watching a mouse realize there's a cat in the house. She was clever, but not clever enough. One night I saw her on the feed, sitting at the kitchen table with her phone in her hand. She was talking to someone, her voice low, urgent. I couldn't make out the words, but I saw the way her eyes darted to the corners of the room, the way she kept glancing at the smoke detector above her head. She knew, or at least she suspected. That was when I decided it was time to meet her. Properly, I mean. Not as the landlord, not as the man behind the cameras, but as someone who could finally step out from behind the curtain. I rehearsed what I'd say, how I'd smile, how I'd make her feel safe. People are so easy to manipulate when they're scared. All you have to do is offer them a little comfort, a little certainty. I scheduled a maintenance visit for the next morning. I told her there was a problem with the plumbing, that I'd need to check the pipes under the sink. She agreed, her voice tight, her words clipped. I could tell she didn't believe me, but she didn't have a choice. That's the thing about being a landlord. People have to let you in, whether they want to or not. That night, I barely slept. I watched the feeds, watched her pace the apartment, watched her pack a small bag and set it by the door. She was planning to leave, maybe even go to the police. I couldn't let that happen. Not yet. When morning came, I put on my best shirt, grabbed my toolbox, and headed upstairs. My heart was pounding, but not from fear, from excitement. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. She opened the door just a crack, her eyes wide and wary. I smiled, held up the toolbox, made a joke about leaky pipes. She didn't laugh. She stepped aside, letting me in, but kept her distance. I could feel her watching me as I knelt by the sink, pretending to check the pipes. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and electric. I glanced up, met her eyes. She looked away, biting her lip. I wondered what she'd do if she knew just how much I'd seen, how much I knew about her. I wondered if she'd scream, or if she'd just freeze, like a rabbit caught in headlights. But before I could say anything, there was a knock at the door. Loud, insistent. She jumped, her hand flying to her mouth. I stood up, wiping my hands on my jeans, trying to look casual. "Are you expecting someone?" I asked, keeping my voice light. She shook her head, backing away from the door. The knock came again, louder this time. I felt a flicker of annoyance. This wasn't part of the plan. She moved to the door, hesitated, then opened it just enough to see who was there. I couldn't see past her, but I heard voices. Firm, authoritative. Police. My stomach dropped. For the first time, I felt a sliver of something cold slide down my spine. She turned to look at me, her eyes hard now, no longer afraid. "They want to talk to you," she said, her voice steady. I tried to smile, tried to play the part, but I could feel the mask slipping. The officers stepped inside, their eyes scanning the room, their hands resting on their belts. "Sir, we need you to come with us," one of them said. I opened my mouth to protest, to ask what this was about, but I saw the phone in her hand, the red light blinking. She'd been recording me the whole time. As they led me out of the apartment, I caught one last glimpse of her standing in the doorway, her face calm, almost triumphant. I realized then that I'd underestimated her. I'd thought I was the one in control, but I was just another rat in the maze. They put me in the back of the squad car, the doors locking with a heavy, final click. I stared out the window as the building receded into the distance, my mind racing. I wasn't afraid, not really. I'd played the game and lost, that was all. There would be other games, other chances. There always are. But for now, the cameras are off, the screens are dark, and for the first time in a long time, I'm the one being watched. The ride to the station was silent, except for the faint crackle of the police radio. I watched the city slide by, the familiar streets suddenly distant, unreachable. I wondered if she was still standing at the window watching me disappear. I wondered if she felt safe now, or if she'd always be looking over her shoulder, waiting for the next shadow to move. At the station, they took my phone, my keys, even my shoelaces. They sat me in a small, windowless room with a table and two chairs. The walls were a dull, institutional gray, the kind that swallows sound and makes time stretch. I waited. I've always been good at waiting. Eventually, a detective came in. He was older, with tired eyes and a voice that tried to sound friendly. He asked me about the apartment, about the cameras, about the girl. I told him what I had to. I kept my answers short, careful. I could see the way he watched me, looking for cracks, for guilt, for anything that might make his job easier. He showed me photos, grainy stills from the hidden cameras, screenshots from my computer. Evidence, he called it. I looked at them, then looked at him. I didn't say a word. There was nothing to say. They kept me there for hours, asking the same questions in different ways, hoping I'd slip up. I didn't. I've always been careful, but it didn't matter. They had what they needed. The cameras, the recordings, the notes I'd kept, my own meticulous records, now turned against me. When they finally let me out of the interrogation room, it was only to move me to a cell. The door clanged shut behind me, the sound echoing in the narrow space. I sat on the cot, staring at the blank wall, listening to the distant hum of voices and footsteps. I wondered if anyone else in this place had ever watched someone as closely as I had. I doubted it. Days blurred together. They brought me food, let me shower, gave me a thin blanket that smelled of bleach. Sometimes I heard the guards talking about me. The landlord, they called me, their voices low and wary. I could tell they didn't understand. No one ever does. My lawyer came to see me once. He was young, nervous, sweating through his suit. He told me the charges: illegal surveillance, invasion of privacy, stalking. He said the media had picked up the story. There were interviews, news segments, even a photo of my building on the front page. He asked if I wanted to make a statement. I shook my head. What would be the point? The world had already decided what I was. At night, I lay awake listening to the sounds of the jail, the clang of doors, the distant shouts, the endless, restless movement. I thought about the apartment, about the girl, about the cameras now gathering dust behind the walls. I wondered if anyone would ever find them all. I doubted it. I'd been thorough. Sometimes I imagined her life now, free from the invisible eyes, the constant surveillance. Maybe she'd move out, find a new place, start over. Maybe she'd always feel watched, even when she was alone. That was the thing about fear. Once it's inside you, it never really leaves. The trial was quick. The evidence was overwhelming. The judge looked at me like I was something he'd scraped off his shoe. The jury didn't take long to decide. Guilty on all counts, they sentenced me to years behind bars. No chance of parole for a long, long time. Now my world is smaller than ever. A cell, a bed, a window with bars. I watch the other inmates, the guards, the routine. I keep notes in my head, out of habit. Patterns, habits, weaknesses. Old instincts die hard, but there are no cameras here. No screens, no feeds, no way to reach beyond these walls. I am the one being watched now. Every move monitored, every word recorded. The control I once had is gone, replaced by the cold, unblinking eyes of the system. Sometimes I catch my reflection in the polished metal of the sink. I look ordinary, just another face in the crowd. No one would ever guess what I've done, what I've seen. But I know, and I know that somewhere out there she's living her life, free from my gaze. That's the way it ends. Not with a scream, not with violence, but with silence. With the slow, steady suffocation of control slipping away. I am alone, isolated, invisible at last. And that, I suppose, is the real punishment.